If any one discipline wins, then everyone loses. There's not just one discipline that takes priority over all the others. And what I mean by this is that if you ever meet game developers off of gargantuan teams, you'll occasionally meet some of these folks. And this isn't fair to characterize all people this way, but you will find designers who are certain that if only everyone would just do whatever the designer said, then the game would be the ultimate game. You'll find plenty of engineers who will say if only everyone would just let the engineers run free and do things their way, you'd get the ultimate game. Plenty of artists will say that if only everyone would listen to what the artists have to say and do exactly as the artists say, then they could finally make the best game possible. And sure enough, you'll hear marketing people make the same case, that in fact everyone should just do whatever marketing says, and then they would have a successful game. And the reality is, the only reason why these conflicting attitudes can coexist is because of the creative tension that comes from people looking out for different aspects of the game and negotiating those trade-offs. That, you know, there's all the time situations where, an easy example of this would be where the visual artists, they want the scene to look nice. Oftentimes, that's part of their priority. That's their expertise. That's their profession. That's what the background that they've been trained in. All their rules of thumb are wrapped around how do we make sure that this view looks great, that the presentation is seamless, that we just love what we're looking at. Now, the game designer, in contrast, is not often trained as a visual artist. Some are, many aren't. But instead, their priority to the art is much more functional. They want to make sure that the player knows that that item over there can be picked up. They want to know that that switch on the wall can be interacted with. They want to be able to tell that that icon is one you're supposed to collect, but that icon is one you're supposed to avoid. And that kind of visual language doesn't always jive with whatever looks best. Occasionally it means that this object has to kind of pop in kind of a distracting way. Now, there's probably still an aesthetically pleasing way to do it, and there's still a range from hideous to kind of blends in way to do it. But you can see how these things start to conflict in terms of what looks nice as opposed to what plays well. And a common conflict that comes up between these two is that an animator may feel like in order to preserve the cartoonish style and look and smoothness of their animations, they only want the player's inputs to activate between animations. This is more of a traditional problem. This has largely gone away, but occasionally it crops up still in newer teams where there's a defense around, okay, well, in order to have smooth continuity of movement, then the player should only be able to connect the end of one animation to the start of the next so we can blend them correctly. And what lots of game designers will say is that every time, no matter what an artist or animator tells you, and this is David Perry used to, speak from the stage about this and write this in books, about the importance of the player's button should be instantaneously reactive, should just immediately override whatever animation was going on, doesn't matter. The important thing is that the player, when they push the fire button, is firing instantly, jumping instantly, whatever it is, grabbing the ledge, climbing the ladder, instant response. And again, this is the point where both of them have valid cases. Both of those are valid concerns. And the same way, this is something that I know certainly when I was newer to a bunch of sort of people on the developer side would have a gag reflex to the idea that marketing thought that they should drive. And what that really surfaces isn't either that marketing's all wrong or marketing's all right, but it's rather that they're watching out for something so you don't have to. Do you see what I mean? That they're considering, how does this look from the outside? Is there somebody who actually wants what we're building? Do we have any way to justify and present this in a way that's going to draw people to try it? Because if we don't, then what's all this work for? And that's a privilege to be able to ignore what other specializations focus on, to be able to focus in on just our rules of thumb, to not have to think about what other people on a giant team are worrying about, because we have to worry about, from engineering side, is it performant? Is this code reusable? These kind of other engineering side considerations that to the other parts of the team, they might be indifferent of, besides some secondary effects in relation to. So the reason I bring this up isn't just to say that people on big teams should further appreciate each other's skill differences. Although, if this is a problem for somebody, they certainly should. This is more to do with on small teams, or if you're a solo developer. Oftentimes on small teams, we don't have a full representative set of an audio expert and an art expert, a marketing expert, programming expert, design expert, etc. We often have people who are sharing some mix of those hats, doing their best with just 2 or 3 people in the limited time that they have. And then the important part is to realize that when someone's missing from that equation, that there are important, valuable considerations to look out for, that even if it's not a part of your formal training, if it's not a part of your informal background in a chosen area of core skill discipline, that those other fields look out for things that are important to the player. Look out for things that are important to the overall experience. Easy example I bring up for this, and this is something that, just because I think it's such a clear and stark example of where there's something that's so wrong, but ultimately was the right decision in the bigger picture of things. So long ago, when I was a undergraduate in college, we built this big old fan booth building based on classic Nintendo stuff. And this is Carnegie Mellon's Carnival. It's a summer tradition where different Greek organizations and other college campus groups build little stands and booths celebrating different cartoons and movies and things that they like. But this Carnival booth, you know, we have you can see a light gun zapper staircase. We've got little Smash Brothers Melee scene on the outside. These things only stand up for a few days and they get torn down forever. So it's not like this is something that we're out there selling. It's a fan work. It's a little bit like a cosplay convention of sorts, but we build something for it. Now, one of the things you're going to notice is that cart is stuck in the cartridge, stuck in the Nintendo Entertainment System, upside down. Do you see that? I mean, so right here I have my Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt crossover cartridge, my original probably, and this is the top label, right? And when you insert it into a Nintendo Entertainment System, you flip up the lid, you shove it in there, and the top is up here. But we had a big point of contention in our group, because you'll see here in this photograph, when people walked up the stairs entering the booth, we didn't want them to look at the ugly bottom of the cartridge. We wanted them to see a label where we had designed a special logo. Otherwise, if we did a bunch of work on that, nobody would see it. And I think ultimately, even though at the time this irked me, as someone who was so close to video games and so close to these things, they're like, that's wrong. That cartridge is upside down. And we're going to get called on it because other people will know that. They're going to know it. Ultimately, the greater part of the experience for everybody was improved by that decision to do something that technically was incorrect, because in the context it created an overall better experience. And so those are things to look out for as to when and if our rules of thumb, which are often correct, which are often valuable for us to consider and at least to bring up, when they maybe should have it as a trade-off, give way to some other priority about how it impacts the overall experience, about what someone else in some other realm of consideration, from art, from writing, from gameplay design, whatever it might be, what considerations they bring to it, and how sometimes those should win out. And ultimately we wind up with a much better project overall than if any single discipline gets its way. One of the most common things you find out of small games that don't get very far is it's because somebody on that team was allowed to have their discipline get their way, and what's left over is an incomplete experience. So anyway, just something to think about. Chris Dion here from GameKeto. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to playing your games in the future. Thanks.